This morning's scripture is taken from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 through 12. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up.
I have a little assignment for the kids this morning. We used to do this a lot, and we're going to try it, see how it works. And I'll guarantee you some of the adults are going to do this too. But we usually do it for the kids, and that is I usually have a key word that goes with the lesson, and I want the kids to keep track of how many times I'm using it. We did this with Amelia as she was growing up and in other places, because it causes them to help them pay attention. So today, the main word I'm going to use, your key word today is going to be help or helps. Okay, got it? This is yes, this is no. Mainly for the kids. If you act like a kid, we'll count you too. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, and this lesson, as I thought more about it today, I call it how to help the preacher. It could be just how to help the leadership. And Dave mentioned we've got some visitors here, so just to kind of clue you in a little bit on what's happening. This is about my fourth Sunday here. We just started at the first part of February. So we're new here. Debbie and Amelia are here for spring break because of some family things. They're in Tennessee taking care of some ailing family members. And so this is the last of what I like to call my New Church, New Beginning series, that I just present these whenever we're new to a place. And next week we'll move on to something else. So Ephesians 4 is going to be our main section that we look at. And as I said, it could be the leadership that we're looking to help. Or I could just call it how to help the preacher, because I am going to talk a lot about me, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I mean, think about it. Aren't you your own favorite person? Who takes better care of you than you? Well, maybe mom took better care of you back in the day, but now, we have to take care of ourselves, and a lot of times it's not considered polite to talk about yourself, but sometimes you need to. And I'm only doing this because, as I said, it's the end of this first series that I like to preach anytime I go to a new place. And the thing to remember is that all leaders in a church situation, whether it's elders, whether it's deacons, whether it's preachers, are key to development and key to growth. And as we saw in Ephesians, Paul pointed out some of the offices that are appointed to help the church to grow. And there's always great potential in a town, in a place where people can reach out. Now remember, there's about 30,000 people, give or take, here in Danville. And there's only one of me. And so it's going to take everybody participating and helping in the work to make sure that the church grows. So let's look at this. And everything that I'm going to present today is applicable to all the leaders, anybody who is considered a leader in a church. And first of all, you need to understand the preacher's work, or the elder's work too. Because they do bring a lot of responsibility with them. And a couple of things to understand about the preacher's work and about the elder's work too. And that is, number one, that we are accountable, or we serve God primarily. I mean, sure, the preacher gets paid by the congregation, and sometimes there's an elder and or a deacon maybe on it, but we answer to God. That is who we are primarily going to be accountable to. And that is who we primarily have to answer to. At the end, when I'm standing before God, He's going to want to know whether or not I was faithful to the word that He gave us to preach. And then, does this mean that the preacher is any more important to God than you? Well, the answer is no. God is no respecter of persons. You're just as important as I am to God. If you remember in Matthew chapter 20, when the mother of Zebedee's children came to Jesus, and she said, "Lord, I have a favor to ask of you." And He said, "What do you want?" I'm paraphrasing. He said, "Well, what do you want?" And she said, "I want that one of my sons sit on your right side and the other on the left when you come into your kingdom." And then Jesus gave them an answer, but what was the result among the disciples? They were pretty upset, weren't they? They did not like the fact that they had asked for special treatment. And that's when Jesus gave them a lesson about how the greatest among you is going to be the what? The servant. Servant leadership is what all churches need. And that got me to thinking about some of the big mega church ministers. 10,000 people in their church. Well, 10,000 people, that's the size of a small town. In fact, I've lived in towns that didn't have 10,000 people in them. And stop and think about it. At their house, they've got a housekeeper, probably have a nanny for the kids, a butler, a driver. They get down there to wherever their church facility is. Joel Osteen has, or he did, I don't know if he still does, he had a facility there in Houston where the Houston Rockets used to play. That's a big building. And he gets in there and he's got secretaries and all kinds of people doing all this, that, and the other for him. I don't see a whole lot of servanthood going on there. At least on the surface. It might be below the surface. I don't know. But when I think about that, when I see the Pope going around in chauffeured limousines and having an army of servants waiting on, that's not really servant leadership. Servant leadership is, I'm going to get down here in the trenches and roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do everything that I ask you to do. Or at least most of it. You don't want me to lead singing. We've already gone over that. But I'm going to try and do everything that I'm asking for you to do. And that's what Jesus wants us to do. We are all together. And then some do think the preacher has an easy life. Yeah, he only works one day a week, right? Well, let me ask you ladies something. How long does it take you to prepare, let's say, Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner? About a half an hour, right? I heard someone over here say about a week. How long does it take for that turkey to get demolished and consumed? About a half an hour. All right. When the preacher delivers a sermon, it takes what, about 30 minutes? May seem longer, may seem shorter, depending on it. But I have known some preachers that it literally takes them up to 40 hours to prepare one sermon. And there's various reasons for that. But then we get up 30 minutes, boom, it's done. But you have to understand that comes with it. And then there are going to be some pressures with ministry. Fortunately, to be honest with you, I've had not very many pressures that have been put on me. It's a big help to be able to get through the week that way. But I have known some pressures or some ministers that their situation has been an absolute powder keg or pressure cooker because of various and sundry reasons. And then ministry does carry a very big burden because of the souls that are at stake. Now just think about it. When I sit down and have a Bible study with somebody, there's a soul writing on it. When you sit down and have a Bible study, there's a soul writing on it. Because there has to be at that time, at some point they're going to make a decision. Yes, I want to become a Christian, or no, I don't want to become a Christian. So there's some pressure building there. Ministry can also be difficult because of the unity of the church. Now, most of the churches I've been in have been pretty unified. Everybody gets along, we're on the same page. I had one situation where it took me about a year to figure out these people really don't like each other. Seriously. That's when years later I was interviewing at a church and they said they had talked to one of the members and he had told them, well, that church was an unhappy church. And he said, asked me, well, what did he mean by that? I said, I don't know. But I can tell you what I would mean by that, and we had a discussion about it. But they were not particularly unified. And then I found out there were some deep-seated issues between some of the families that went back decades. And there was the problem right there. They had never resolved any of those issues. Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 about being sufficient for these things. That is the work that God has given church leaders to do. And a lot of times, I'll tell you, there are times that I feel very inadequate to do the job. Because sometimes there are some big mountains. I don't know about you elders, whether at times you feel unprepared or inadequate to do it. Because it is a big job. The President of the United States has a very responsible job, right? You all agree with that. Regardless of your political affiliation, it's a very responsible job. But what does he have to do with people going to heaven? Nothing. So in that respect, we've got a much more responsible job, don't we? We've got souls writing on it. So we've got to remember that and keep the unity and keep the work going. Ministers are also aware there's sometimes a lack of time to do everything that needs to be done. Now with COVID, there's not a whole lot we can do as far as events and outreach. But pre-COVID, if you remember, and some of you can remember back far back enough where we had multiple gospel meetings a year. We had VBSs and things. And there would be a time crunch a lot of times to get things done and taken care of. And sometimes things slip by. Remember, the minister is human. And the elders are humans. Things aren't always going to go quite exactly as we would like for them to go. And so we have to remember that we do have an enormous task ahead of us, but let's keep ourselves focused on the main important things. Let's also remember to respect and cooperate with the leadership here. When you look at Timothy and Titus, you can see they were having some issues because people didn't respect their leadership. Mainly because they were both pretty young men. The word there in Timothy when he says, let no one despise your youth or look down upon you because you're young, that word could refer to someone as old as 40 years old. So we're guessing Timothy is probably in his 30s somewhere. By our standards, and really even by them, that's not a real young man. But just think about it. You're in your 60s or in your 70s. You've got this 20 or 30-something-year-old whippersnapper trying to tell you how to live your life. How many of you, I hear some people out there snickering. And I have known some people with that kind of an age difference who have laughed in the face of young preachers. Because, hey, I got it all figured. I'm going to live to be your father. What do you think you can tell me? And so Paul is trying to convince Timothy to stand his ground, basically. You're the leader. You're the one teaching. And they're going to have to respect. Now, in our culture, we tend to kind of flip that. We tend to look more for youth instead of people who are older. But there are cultures in the world where the older you get, you don't have anything to worry about because people will look to you with respect. But you got to remember, whoever the leader is, whether he's older than you or younger than you, he deserves the respect that comes with the office. Because Paul is trying to encourage Timothy that what you are doing is noble. I know it doesn't help any when people are disrespecting you, but you have a noble task. Elders have got a noble task. All of us have got a noble task so far as the gospel goes. And we've got to remember that it's not just one person, but it's all of us who've got to step up and do the work and to evangelize this community. Then as now the church members maybe aren't aware of some of the stresses that come with ministry and leadership. I have known ministers in churches that have split, and sometimes it is the minister's fault. I've known where elders have done the same thing, deacons. See, what we have to remember is that, or be aware of, is the fact that most church splits really don't have a whole lot to do with straight-up doctrinal issues. We try to hide behind them sometimes, but a lot of times it's just a couple of factions who just aren't getting their way. And so that becomes the issue. You got to remember, you're not always going to get your way. The leaders might not always do something or make a decision that you agree with, but you've got to respect and cooperate and help out with that decision, whatever it is. And just remember, maybe next time you'll get your way. And we just have to remember that. And remember that ministers should always want to have godly desires. Now, you would think that anybody going into this profession would have godly desires, but not all of them do. Some of them do quit really quickly because they don't have godly desires. There is a certain zeal that comes with wanting to do this work. You have to have a certain level of excitement, a certain level of zeal and self-motivation to do it. But a lot of people maybe don't have that. The other problem is to look at Revelation chapter 3 for just a minute and see what Jesus had to say to Laodicea, to that church there. They were lukewarm. They didn't really have enthusiasm. But what they did have apparently was an inflated self-image of themselves. And I have known some, and they weren't necessarily preaching in big mega churches, but I have known some that were in churches maybe about this size, but they had huge egos. They couldn't stand to be questioned. They couldn't stand to be contradicted in any way. That's going to be a problem if you've got that kind of an ego and you're trying to be a servant leader. And that's what happened in Laodicea. A wealthy city. Also, the church itself was wealthy. But it seems like they were trying to claim some kind of their material wealth was equating into spiritual wealth, and that wasn't what God wanted. You can be, Bill Gates is a really wealthy man, obviously, one of the richest in the world. Spiritually, though, I'm guessing his account is pretty low. I don't know. Can't read his heart, but that's just the impression that I get. And that's what was going on here in Laodicea when you look at that. The church there had this inflated image, and then notice that it was so bad it was making God sick. Now remember, he said, you are neither hot nor cold, you are lukewarm. Actually, hot and cold are both good in this context. They had a spring there, apparently, that would come in, and the water was lukewarm. That's where they got their drinking water. It was lukewarm, and it was very heavily laden with minerals. And if you just took it straight up and drank it, it would make you nauseous. That's what God is trying to say. When you get self-sufficient, when you're not paying attention, and you're trying to do it alone without God's help, without God's leading, you're going to become self-sufficient. And church leaders can't do that. Preachers can't do that. Elders and deacons can't do that. We got to remember we are not any better than any of the members are. And it doesn't help any when we start letting our egos get the best of us. And that's some people I've known have gone into ministry and wanted to just because they're the center of attention. And you can't do that if you're wanting to lead and have that servant leadership. Preachers also need to know that the congregation has got his back. How many of you have gone out for lunch? You don't have to raise your hand, but you've gone out for lunch and the menu consisted of roast preacher. Some of you, and not you. The preacher's wife also likes to roast the preacher occasionally. But if you've ever preached a sermon or ever had a church leader position, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Because some people like, in fact, I had a friend once that was traveling. They asked him to speak. He visited a church and they just asked if he'd like to speak. He said, sure. So he presented a lesson. Then they had Sunday school after his sermon, and his wife was telling me that the class consisted of picking the preacher's sermon apart and criticizing it. What we need to know is that, and I need to know, my family needs to know, is you've got our back. If there is gossip, complaints, and that kind of thing, it gets nipped in the bud. That if someone has an issue, they come and talk to us, and they don't just go around the church talking to everybody but us. And that should go with anybody. That if there are issues, Jesus gave us in Matthew 18 the formula for dealing with it. And it doesn't involve gossip. Another thing we have to understand, that preachers need encouragement when criticized. Elders need encouragement when criticized. Am I right about it, guys? Deacons, don't you need encouragement occasionally? Let me point out something that we usually miss. Hebrews chapter 10. What's the go-to verse in Hebrews chapter 10? We go running to verse 25, don't we? And we usually quote it as, don't forsake the assemblies. It's not exactly what it said. Look at it again. But when you look at verse 25, look at verse 24. What's it say in context? You'll hear me say this a lot. Context is your friend. It gives you the exact meaning. Look at verse 24. Let us consider one another in order to do what? Stir up love and good works. I think the old King James says, let us provoke one another to love and good works. We got the provoking part down. But we don't have the good works part sometimes. And then he goes on to say, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some. Notice, provoke or consider or encourage one another to good works. That's why we come together. Sure, we take the Lord's Supper and we praise God, we have a lesson in that. But we often overlook this is also what should be happening. We're here to provoke one another to good works. Not just provoke one another, but encourage one another to good works. Do we want the church to grow? Do we want lots of visitors? Then we need to encourage one another. It doesn't help us if we're provoking and tearing each other down and criticizing, does it? So let's remember this passage too when we talk about coming together. To encourage one another. And help one another, push one another forward. And then let's also notice that this word encourage is grammatically is a continuous action. I don't just come in here and encourage one another for a few minutes and then we go on our way. It should be continuous. Every day. You know, maybe we don't see each other every day. Shoot someone an email. If you know they haven't been here, call them. I know with COVID, we got to relook how we do visits and things like that. It might take it where we're just picking up the phone and calling people. Most of us have an email. Let's use it. How many of you text? Let's text each other. And do that to encourage one another. And then preachers need people who are genuine peacemakers. Now remember, peace isn't just the absence of conflict. We're talking about where situations and problems get resolved. And we need that in the church if we're going to help it to grow, if we're going to do anything to keep it on a firm foundation and keep it growing. We need people who will be peacemakers. One writer said that a truce just says you don't shoot for a while. Peace comes when the truth is known, the issue is settled, and the parties embrace each other. That's what a peacemaker does, is help bring that about. And you know, if you've ever been in someone's house or a family's house, you can sometimes feel the tension. You know there's not peace here. Other times you go in and you know that they're at peace, that it's a happy, stable family. And I want people when they come in here, visitors when they come in here, to feel this is a happy, stable family. that we are at peace with one another. And then we also need congregations to understand the preacher's work. It's not just preaching on Sunday mornings. We basically are on call 24 hours a day. Elders on call 24 hours a day. If someone gets sick or has a crisis, they usually call the preacher or they call one of the elders. We usually get involved in it somehow. So you have to understand that too. And remember, there's one of me and however many there are sitting out there today, 40, 50, 60 people. There's 3 elders, and they're still outnumbered by the numbers of members and visitors. But you got to understand that we will do what we can to help you with your crisis, help you with situations, help you to understand Bible passages. Whatever help you need, we'll help you to do it as best that we can. And then let's also remember to help the preacher by praying. This is probably the best thing you can do for me, for my family, for the elders, for the deacon, is keep us in your prayers. That we make wise and good decisions as we're going along trying to lead the church. And if you will look at Acts chapter 1, we're going to look at something right there here in just a minute. You'll see that a church that is praying together is going to be much bigger than the elders, the preacher, the deacons. It is a big important to pray. That's the best way to help out. And look at the various hours, the long hours that what elders and preachers do can drain them to where we're problem conscious. What do I mean by that? It means we're just looking at the problems around us. And we don't become power conscious of God's power that he can work through us and with us to resolve some of these. And some churches get very rocky in their relations with one another and when problems come up. So we got to remember to pray for the preacher, keep us and the leaders here in prayers to help us pray through problems, because the preacher can become very weary. And I'll tell you, sometimes my prayer life has suffered. So keep me and my family in your prayers, keep the elders in your prayers, and we'll try and keep ourselves on our prayers schedule and keep you in our prayers as well. Keep it up. Keep the prayers coming. And then remember to consider those in Acts chapter 1. Look at those, if you'll flip over there, when they were getting ready to appoint Judas's, too many S's there, to appoint his successor. They spent a lot of time in prayer. It wasn't just a quick 30-second prayer like we might do before a meal, but prayer is actually the main emphasis of this passage. And you notice throughout the book of Acts how much time they spent in prayer. Sometimes I really wish we had the manpower. Well, here again, this is a pre-COVID thing, and hopefully it'll be a post-COVID thing, when we can get our Sundays classes back together. I really wanted to take church leaders and me and them go in a place while everybody else is in class, and we dedicate that time to prayer for the classes that are going on right now, and then for the sermon and the service that's coming up, and start getting back to that time of prayer. And remember, Jesus spent all night in prayer before he picked the disciples. I would love to have been a fly on the rock and just listened to that, wouldn't you? I don't know how long his prayer was. It just says he prayed all night. Might occasionally have stopped to sing a hymn. I don't know. But it was a monumental decision that he had coming up to appoint those apostles. So he gave it to prayer. And I really wish we could. I know a lot of times that's not practical because we need the manpower to be teaching classes. But I would really like somehow to get leadership where we can to dedicate more time to prayer. And then it was both men and women that prayed continuously. They kept it going. It wasn't just a fast, oh Lord, be with us as we make this decision prayer. It went on for a while. And by a while, I don't know how long it was. But the early church recognized the importance of prayer. A friend of mine once pointed out, in those days, he said, they got together to fast and pray. We tend to get together to eat and pray, if we even pray. Think about it for a minute. Don't we always have food? Not saying that it's wrong, mind you. But in our culture, we center everything on food, and prayer sometimes becomes a little bit of a secondary effect. A secondary activity. I've been at youth devotionals and things. Oh yeah, we forgot to pray. Yeah, well, let's have a prayer real quick. And that just becomes more of a ritual that we're going through, and it doesn't carry the meaning. So we got to remember to put meaning back into our prayer time. And like they did here in Acts. And that was a very important decision that they were trying to make. 2 Thessalonians 3. Paul asked them to remember to pray for them. Brethren, pray for us. Now keep in mind, Paul is an inspired apostle, and he's asking people to pray for him. So think about it this way. If an inspired apostle needed the prayers of the church, the preacher needs it. The elders need it. The deacons need it. Because we're not inspired like Paul was. So remember to keep them in prayers. If Paul needed it, then definitely we need it. And then let's remember to help the preacher and help by supporting the work, being a part of it, and be supportive of the work here. Have you ever had a church activity plan, like a VBS, and someone just say, I'm not being a part of it? I've known a few of those. Because they didn't like the theme. Because, and I'm not kidding, because they had a big issue with the puppets for the kids. And some of the activities for the kids. I thought, okay, well, that's for the kids. You know, I'll go to the adult class over here where we're doing a lesson on an adult level. Maybe you need to be over here with the kids because you're acting like one right now. That kind of thing happened. Support the work. Because a working church wins more souls than just the preacher. Look again at Acts. Acts is our playbook. Look at what happened in Acts. The early church there had a dynamic growth because everybody was a part of it. Now, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be doing public sermons and public classes. There's always behind-the-scenes stuff that has to be done too, that goes into the work of the church. The early disciples, you notice, also did not let persecution stop them. Now, I don't know if you're paying attention to what's going on in Washington and some of the state capitals, but this could become a very real issue for us. We were living in Canada when the Supreme Court of Canada forced the hand of Parliament to legalize same-sex marriage. And it was right after that I presented a sermon about what the Bible says about marriage and about homosexuality. It's the only time I've only ever one time preached a sermon that was dedicated exclusively to homosexuality, and that was it. And afterwards, a young man, he was, I think, might have just graduated high school or he was about to, came up and he said, you know, you broke the law. I said, what are you talking about? He said, preaching against homosexuality. I said, no, that's not yet, but it could be coming. Well, guess what? Churches in Canada now are getting in trouble for it. We had a TV program we helped sponsor. It was out of Texas, and it was called Key to the Kingdom, and the speaker at the time was a man named Michael Tackett, and he came up a couple of times to speak and promote the program. And there was an arm of what we would call the FCC, but I forget what they call it in Canada, who was watching programs like that. He read from Leviticus. And they said, well, that's okay because you're just quoting it. If he had elaborated anything on it, there's a good possibility they would have yanked that episode of the show from the airwaves. And today, I don't think you could get away with presenting it. Could it happen here? Theoretically, no, it can't because of our First Amendments. But just keep an eye on things. It could come down to it. Where we get someone who comes in and wants their same-sex ceremony here in the building or has some issue with it, and then we're really going to have to stand together. You're really going to have to make sure you not only have my back, but the elders' back and everybody else's here too. And then we have to remember too that the personal evangelism of Philip, the evangelist, that's why he is referred to in church history as the evangelist. He had a great ministry going, but he was told, go on down here to this desert road. He went on down and he ran into the eunuch, and we all know how that turned out. But he did what he was told to do. He was a worker. And every church is going to need workers in them. We need everybody to participate, everybody to be helping out, everybody to do their part so that we can help the church to grow. You know, it's not going to be just me that makes it grow. I know, and here again, going back to the whole idea of ego-driven. Don't be careful when someone says, I caused all this growth. Because that's probably more their ego talking than anything else. Because blessed and happy is the preacher when people continually win souls. If you've got someone who wants to have a study, you want me to be a part of it, just let me know. Now, I don't know if we can get together face to face. Again, we got to factor in COVID. We might have to do it on Zoom or use Facebook messenger video call, or we come in here and I sit up here and you sit over there and sits over here. We do it that. We'll find a way to get it done. Where there's a will, there's a way. If you know someone who's interested, just let's get it together and see what we can do to make it work. We'll find a way. And then there's some ways here that you can help in supporting not just me, but the work here in general. Be a partner here. Join in actually doing the work. Participate. Be faithful in the church activities. We had a campaign one time. We had a youth group come up from Birmingham to where we were working once, and there were some people there who took their vacation that week so they could be a part of it. We tried that same group coming to another place, and it was a failure. A lot of it was because when I was trying to get members to come and be a part, we go on vacation that week. We go to our cottage. We go here. They wouldn't change their routine to help accommodate this. So we didn't have any conversion, any baptism, any visitors during that campaign. The first one, we had a couple of baptisms. I think we had 2 baptisms that week. It was successful because everybody participated. And then promote the work. Show some enthusiasm. I really think part of the reason that churches aren't growing is because we don't show any enthusiasm or excitement about it. Oh, I got to go to church. My parents are making me go to church. I'm just going because my wife's dragging me to church. Boy, that makes me want to go if you invite me, doesn't it? But yet, how many times do we try a new restaurant that just opened up? We come in all excited. Hey, you got to go try this place. Hey, you like Mexican food? I know this great Mexican place. Let's go. Or people who go to see a movie and they become a walking billboard for it. Hey, come see this movie. You're going to love it. And they go 4 or 5 times to see it. But I got to go to church. I got to get up early. Let's see, we don't meet till 10:30. You could sleep in even till 7 or 8 o'clock. Or you can do like I do, and they're up by 5 o'clock every morning. Anybody want to join me? I usually don't get any takers on that one. But it will help if you can show some enthusiasm. Just like you show enthusiasm for a movie, a sports team, a restaurant. Let's show some enthusiasm for coming to church. Be excited about it. I don't have to go, but I get to go and meet with God's people. Amen. And the kids get to come and see their friends. My daughter was real excited to come here because of the kids here and the friends that she made the last time she was here. Debbie, not so much. I got to listen to that preacher again. It comes with the territory. After 25 years, almost 26 years, you get kind of tired of it. But you got to show some enthusiasm, and then prayer. Pray for the preacher, pray for the elders, pray for the leaders, pray for this church to grow. Pray for visitors to be here with open hearts and open minds. Pray for those who used to come. I know there's some that are staying at home because of COVID. I understand that. But what about the ones who used to come that aren't joining in online? They aren't here because they just aren't coming. There's a few of those around here, aren't there? I can promise you there are. Let's see if we can't get some of them back and start praying for them. And then be supportive of the church's works here. Be supportive, and remember, this is Jesus' church. It's not my church. It's not your church. This belongs to Jesus. It doesn't belong to man. He established it. He laid out the rules, for lack of a better term, for how it operates. We can't change anything that he has given us. There are some areas where we might have some matters of opinion, and that's where we can have a vote on it. The elders can decide. There's any number of ways we can decide our meeting times and that kind of thing. But once a decision is made, you need to support the decision. So are you a helper, a critic? Are you an encourager? How big are your prayers for the preacher and the church and the elders? Are you a soul winner? Because I need you to help win souls. The Lord needs you to help win souls. The elders need you to help win souls. Let's go out and think souls, because that's what it's all about, is saving souls. That's where our focus needs to be, is converting people to Christ, and once they're Christians, keep them Christians. Amen. That's where all the real work comes in, actually, I think, is after they become a Christian. Keeping them faithful. So this morning, think souls. If we can help you in any way, if you have a need, if you're not a Christian and would like to talk about it, we'll offer that invitation. If you don't want to come forward, that's fine. I can talk to you privately. But let's make sure everybody here is sure of their salvation in case you were to walk out there, you never know. You walk out there, Jesus might be there saying, time is up, I'm taking my people home. Are you going to go home with them, yes or no? If the answer is no, then we need to talk about it. If it's I don't know, we need to talk about it. Make sure that you are right with the Lord. If we can help you, let us know as we stand and as we sing.